When one looks at concerns around human trafficking in relation to the World Cup, I think it's quite interesting if one looks back at Germany 2006, in fact.
There are reports of thousands of women being transported to Germany for sex during the World Cup.
Germany is a country that had legalized prostitution, and Germany and the Netherlands and some of the European countries weren't forced to come to terms with the reality of what they'd created. By legalizing prostitution, they increased the amount of unlawful prostitution that took place in those countries because they legitimized this industry.
After the German World Cup, the International Organization for Migration conducted an assessment to determine whether the fears about the number of people coming into both the sex work industry and who would have been trafficked were realized. And in fact, a very small number of people were found to have been trafficked to Germany during this period, around under 20.
E. Benjamin Skinner is a reporter and human trafficking expert, and he's the author of the book, A Crime So Monstrous. Ben, how similar is what we just saw to what goes on at any international event?
It's hard to gauge, and it's a mistake to try to compare South Africa to Germany 4 years ago, for example. Germany had very aggressive policing in place to counteract human trafficking. In South Africa, there is no comprehensive law against human trafficking, and so what you see in South Africa is particularly egregious.
In fact, one of the clear findings from this report, one of the statements made by the IOM at that stage, is there's no reason to believe that there's any correlation between big sporting events and increases in human trafficking. And I think that's an important lesson because it's the same thing that was found in 2004 when Athens hosted the Olympic Games. So there's no reason necessarily, and certainly no evidence on which to base an assessment that South Africa would experience a peak in trafficking around the World Cup.
I think there's a degree to which it's the one sort of starts to create the other. So if you start to give people that news and they start to buy it on the horror factor, you kind of create, you almost in the same sense, create the need for people to want to buy that anyway, to see what other horrors happen today.
There will be an increase in demand for the illegal commercial sex trade in connection with the Super Bowl. And he says we ought to expect that some of the sex workers who come here are the victims of human trafficking. The Attorney General made opening remarks this morning at a training program for law enforcement, prosecutors, and victims advocates. He says human trafficking is a problem that has been ignored until recently.
Many of the rather hysterical news reports that came out or have come out in South Africa recently echo much of what was said in 2006. In fact, curiously enough, newspaper reports shortly before the World Cup in 2006 in Germany said 40,000 prostitutes expected to descend upon Germany for the World Cup, of which many are expected to be trafficked. And in fact, we heard that very same figure, 40,000, in the South African press recently.
Close to 40,000 lives a year to import 40,000 girls. The Japanese were issuing 40,000, quote, entertainer visas.